We're recording now, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee for the 24th of September 2020. I've got a little few things that I just need to cover for housekeeping. So the Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and the remote meetings protocol agreed by the Council, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public, and can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you're not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise and to help the audio visual quality of the broadcast. The Council standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as an ordinary meeting, and the members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind members to ensure that their chat function is switched on and to use the facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on any particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. For the benefit of everyone watching on the live stream, when I invite members to cast their vote on any particular item, they will do so electronically using the voting facility in the chat function. The votes will automatically be counted and recorded on the system, but individual votes are not identified on the screen, and the chat room poll is not available on the live stream for public viewing. However, I will announce the numbers for votes cast for and against any abstentions before I declare the result. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the Council website for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. The Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound and recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Thank you. Okay, so welcome everybody. It's nice to see you after such a long time. So we've got one agenda item, which is going to be the annual report for 1920, which is going to be presented by the Leader of the Council. First, I'm asking for any apologies that may have been given for the meeting.
No apologies received, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest? No? Okay, good. Next, to look at the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of January for any points of accuracy or any matters arising. If everybody wants to go through their pack and obviously note if there's anything that needs to be brought up. So we've got page 1 of the minutes from the last meeting. As I said, if you want to indicate in the chat if there's anything that you want to be brought up. Page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and the final page. Okay, so we move on to the agenda item then, which is the annual report. I'd like to invite the leader to come onto the screen and present the report to us, please.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm pleased to come with you, be here with you today and present to you the third corporate annual report on Newport City Council's progress against the Corporate Plan 2017 to 22. The purpose of this report is to reflect back on 2019-20, assessing the achievements we made, where we can improve our performance, and looking forward to the remainder of this term. More detailed analysis of the Council's performance across its 8 service areas in 2019-20 was reported to Cabinet in September, and progress against the 2020-21 service plans will be reported to the Council's Performance Scrutiny Committees in November. As the Leader of the Council, I welcome this opportunity for the Scrutiny Committee to provide their feedback, their recommendations to improve the report, and any considerations that my Cabinet and senior officers need to consider. The final report will be made available in Welsh and English. So colleagues, you may recall that in 2017, we set 4 wellbeing objectives as part of this administration's mission to improve people's lives. These were to improve skills, educational outcomes and employment opportunities, to promote economic growth and regeneration whilst protecting the environment, to enable people to be healthy, independent and resilient, and to build cohesive and sustainable communities. These objectives remain at the core of the Council's corporate plan and delivery for the next 2 years. However, colleagues, as we're all well aware, the last 6 months have been very challenging for the Council, for our communities, and our partners that work with us to deliver the Council's services. COVID-19 has and continues to impact on our communities and our economy in Newport. There is a very fine balance to be had on easing restrictions to support the economy to recover, but also to protect the most vulnerable and marginalised within the city. This is why we've taken this opportunity in the report to reflect back on what we've learned and to recognise the effort that the Council, our partners and communities have done and continue to do since March. The COVID-19 crisis has also highlighted inequalities that still exist in society, and we're fully aware of the challenges and further work that we need to do to reduce this gap, but also to ensure that services can still be delivered sustainably in the long term for the Council. There are also new opportunities for the Council to re-examine how we deliver our services better and more efficiently using technology. And within this, there's also an opportunity to look at what we've learned during the past 6 months. This is why we've endorsed the Council's 4 strategic recovery aims that are closely aligned to the corporate plan objectives. These objectives enable the Council to recover its services, develop these new opportunities and learn from the COVID-19 crisis. The delivery of these strategic recovery aims will be monitored through the service plans, and the performance scrutiny committees will have an opportunity in November to review the progress of these actions. The Council's Cabinet will also be receiving monthly updates on the Council's COVID-19 response and an overview of the Council's progress against the recovery aims. I should make it absolutely clear at this stage, colleagues, in terms of our aspirations as set out in this report and the aims that are contained within this, that as our current situation makes very clear, whilst we have set our strategic recovery aims, it is very clear that at some stages in the foreseeable future, we will have to be in a position where we are in a response mode and we're dealing with the challenges that COVID presents to us. Regrettably, this week, the City Council and Welsh Government made the decision to move towards enhanced restrictions in order to try and limit the spread of COVID throughout the city area. It's really important to take this into context when considering the plan and the aims in the plan, because whilst we can sit here today and we consider these aims going forward, it's very important to note that there are external factors that may continue to impact on this. I would like to highlight some financial elements that are contained in this report. And I would also like to emphasise the fact that social services budgets remain critical to budget pressures alongside our council's schools. And for those colleagues who watched or attended the Cabinet meeting last week, you will have seen us discuss this in quite considerable detail. This is something that the Cabinet continues to keep a watchful eye on. Whilst the Council welcomed the additional income from Welsh Government in 2020-21, there remains considerable budget pressures due to COVID-19. At the beginning of the crisis, the Welsh Government provided fiscal support to local authorities to help to ease the burden of the loss of income and additional demand on services. COVID-19 has seen a significant loss in the Council's revenue streams of £3.7 million. and additional expenditure of £1.1 million in social care and school budgets. With continuing restrictions and further localised lockdowns, this could worsen by year end. The monitoring of the Council's financial position and budget planning for next year will be imperative this year as we try to ensure that expenditure remains within budget. So, Chair, I'm pleased to present to you our annual report, and I'm sure that the Chief Executive and myself and heads of service are happy to take any questions that colleagues may have.
Thank you, Leader. Firstly, I would just like to make a comment, I think a general comment. Thank you for coming today. Thank you all for coming today, especially during, as you said, this week where everything seems to have gone once again a little bit crazy. What I would like to also say is commend yourself and the officers for the basically how you've worked through COVID and the things that the city offered in terms of the business loans and the quick turnaround, keeping services going. So personally, I think we've I'd like to thank everybody basically on everything that that went really well. I'm sure there's a lot of there are many positives from us through this, obviously, and hope lessons learned. So I'd actually like to, I'm opening the floor for questions. I'm just waiting for people to raise their hands to see what order they're going to come in. Okay, Councillor Fawsey.
Hello, I don't know, sorry, excuse me, but I don't know why there's a screen sharing going on that I can't see, but anyway, I just wanted to comment on the excellent work that was done with children and providing them with devices to be able to do their homeschooling. One of the things that this COVID crisis has shown to us is that it's highlighted the inequalities in our society, and this was one of the ways in which children who didn't have IT at home were struggling. So I'd like to comment on that and say about the 800 devices that were provided to children across the city. I don't know if anybody can say what percentage of children now have a suitable device and whether whether that is all of them, but that certainly is a good a lot of good work that's been done there. And could I just ask a question about one of the objectives, which is on page 14, where we're talking about an objective to increase the amount of grade A office space in the city. And I wonder whether the COVID crisis has changed this and whether this is no longer needed to such a great extent, and whether that will translate into more support for people working from home. Thank you.
Lida, did you want to answer that, or did the Chief Exec want to answer? Sorry.
Sorry, apologies, Chair. I was waiting to be asked to respond.
Sorry.
It's all right. I think I'm really pleased to hear the positive comments in terms of the work with children, but I would like to highlight something that's really important, and that is that COVID-19 actually highlighted issues around digital exclusion across the city. So the teams have worked really hard to ensure that we do have inclusion going forward, but digital learning and support is now a key aim going forward, and that forms a key part of our recovery strategy to ensure that is in place. I don't know whether the Chief Executive would like to comment on that, because the teams have actually done some fantastic work, as you highlight, Councillor Fawsey, and I'm sure that the Chief Exec may wish to contribute to that as well.
Chair, would you like me to come in?
Yes, please.
Yes, as the leader said, in response to Councillor Forsey's question about the percentage, I haven't got that to hand, Councillor Forsey, but we can certainly provide that information for you. But certainly, as the leader said, the education team, schools, SRS, and our digital team have been working really hard throughout the last couple of months to ensure that remote learning can work as best as it can, and where there are difficulties that we use the wider community support networks that we have. We're making some really good links now with our partners in the third sector, particularly Garvo, and I was having a conversation with the chief executive there just yesterday about what opportunities there are for funding that the third sector can also apply for, because I think, given what's already emerging with the second, this mini second wave of the pandemic, is that we are going to see more and more blended learning over the coming months. So it's certainly one of the areas that we as a senior team are concentrating on, and that Sarah Morgan and Rhys are picking up with the schools.
Thank you. Councillor Forsey, did that answer your question fully?
Yeah, I think the work on providing devices and internet connections to children is extremely good. The other point I raised was about whether the key aim to increase office space is going to remain, or whether there'll be any revision to that. Thank you.
Yeah, leader. Yes.
At this moment, we're currently constantly reviewing this situation, so we are looking at this. We are advised, and the forecasts are that actually the Grade A office space will still be required in the medium to long term. So we're monitoring this very closely, and we've actually introduced or will be holding an economic recovery roundtable. So I'll be speaking to representatives from businesses across all sectors who operate within the area or would like to operate within the area, to try and establish what their priorities are going forward, and ensure that we've been able to align the priorities of business with our priorities in the corporate plan and our strategic recovery aims. So I would say, in relation to this, that this is very much an ongoing objective. I don't know if the Chief Exec would like to comment as well, Chair.
Yeah, yes, please, Chair, if I may, just to
yes,
say we find ourselves in, as we've all said, unprecedented times, and we were on a clear trajectory 6 to 8 months ago about increasing the provision of office space. But as the leader said, we have to reflect. We have to pause on what those plans were. Not necessarily pause, long term, but we have to ascertain what the market is telling us and what the requirements and demand for office space are. So some of that work is already ongoing in line with the COVID recovery aims. But that's not to say that some of the plans that we have already in train that they will be paused. They're continuing. So, for example, the market regeneration scheme, the office facilities at Millen, they're progressing as were prior to the pandemic kicking in.
Thank you for that. Councillor Matthew Evans, next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Just some general comments about the actual corporate plan itself, and I think we pretty much went through these last year. One of the concerns seemed to be, if you compare it with the original plan, it's great that we've got examples going forward, but we seem to just put in things which have happened as opposed to how they related to the plan previously. So it's great that we're using examples, but they're not necessarily ones which were in the original corporate plan. I appreciate it needs to develop and everything else like that, but the other thing about the actual performance indicators themselves, there are a number of, it's great to see so many green, there are a number of amber and red ones on there, and I think we don't appear to have the explanations for them, and I mentioned just one a big concern was the percentage of care leavers in education, training or employment at 12 months. We had a target of 45% and we actually achieved 14%. So I do think we need to ensure that any red or amber ones, we've got an explanation in there as to the reasons why and what we're going to do about it. And finally, just a sort of question really about when we're talking about the strategic aims of the recovery. We mentioned, funny if it's already up on the screen at the moment, strategic aim 3. We talk about fully restoring children and adult services, supporting partners that have been impacted by COVID-19. I just want to know what the sort of barriers are and what the issues or concerns are in relation to that, because it concerns me that when we're using terms like fully restored children and adult services, so perhaps we could get some clarification on that as well, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader, if you want to come forward for that one.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Evans. I think it's important to note that social services during the COVID period were actually running for a longer period of time and more accessible than they had been previously. So during that period, they were running from 8 to 8, 7 days a week, and officers were available, but they did need to adapt the way that they work. And so, for example, some of the centres where perhaps people would have gone to receive services were closed, and so a large number of people actually received services within their homes. So that is considerably different to the experiences that some people would have had previously. So in terms of that point and the point that is being made there, it's not suggesting that people haven't received services. People have received services, but they've just been in a different way because of the necessity to close centres and other locations where the services would have been delivered. I don't know, perhaps if the interim head of social services would like to comment on that as well.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to comment on that.
Yeah, please do.
Just to reassure you, Councillor Evans, the vast majority of social services across both children and adults continued throughout the pandemic. But as the leaders highlighted, we did have to close some of our day services because of requirements around social distancing and obviously the risks around bringing people who have underlying health conditions into close proximity to each other. But and we've also prioritised urgent assessments in the community. So as indicated, the services have been running throughout. We've had to make adjustments. So those people who would formally attend a building-based service, if I can describe it in that way, were supported in the community instead of actually attending the centre. So a lot of work's gone on, and we've also managed to support our care homes throughout this pandemic, because that they've really been at the forefront of COVID-19, and also our colleagues working in domiciliary care, we've supported them so that they have access to all of the PPE that they require so they can continue to provide care and support in people's homes and manage the risks associated with that. So we have to produce a weekly return to Welsh Government across children and adult services, which indicates our ability to provide social care services in the current circumstances. And for nearly all of our feedback to Welsh Government has been that we've been able to maintain services for the most part.
That's great, thanks, Chris, and I appreciate all the work which has been going on. Maybe the wording is just slightly needs changing slightly, and perhaps that's the answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Evans.
Hi, thank you, and thank you to everybody else. I'd like to just pick up on Yvonne's point. She quite to start with, she quite rightly pointed out the good work that's been done with tech, but there's even something even more simpler where I understand that Newport has been really first administrating Welsh Government money for kids to have face masks in school. One wouldn't believe that some children didn't have access to face masks, and as I understand it, all Newport kids have been given 2 free face masks, which seems simple and inexpensive, but it is really important that those kids are going to school safe with those face masks provided by the council. So I'd like to pay tribute to whoever was involved in that. Going back to the leader's closing remarks and obviously the impact of COVID on the budget, I think consolidated with unavoidable loss of income of 3.7 and costs of 1.7, so what's that, 5.4 million, roughly 6 million consolidated. So given that we're going to be probably in this situation until March, what's the projection? Are we going to be looking at 12 million sort of loss of income and expenditure, and what are the leadership team doing to mitigate that moving forward in terms of forecasting and contingencies, and where will that potential money come from? Is there any indication the Welsh Government might provide it from central government, or would it come from reserves?
Thanks, Chris. Leader, if you'd like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Evans. I think you highlight a very important point there, and that is that all services have a cost, and there is a cost to providing them. In Cabinet, we're monitoring this on a monthly basis very closely, and what we're looking at is the potential risk around further loss of revenue income, and I'd like to highlight within that specific risks which are around council tax collection and also an increase in claims against the council tax reduction scheme. Obviously, these go hand in hand. Now, we're working very closely with Welsh Government on this, and what I'm really pleased to share with you is in terms of the expenditure incurred in relation to COVID and some of the lost revenues streams, the Welsh Government have made available a significant sum of money, somewhere around £78 million, for local authorities to actually submit their claims into for reimbursement during this period. So that's funding actually applies to the first quarter. So there is some reassurance there in terms of reimbursement from Welsh Government. We also continue to work closely with Welsh Government around those issues around council tax, because we're very mindful that even a small percentage, fraction of a percentage drop in council tax reduction has a significant impact on our revenue income streams and therefore on our expenditure going forward. And that is a really important point to be mindful of. So we continue to monitor that very closely indeed. And of course, this is something that all heads of service and senior officers need to be mindful of and aware of going forward in terms of planning for the next year. And I'm sure the Chief Executive would be happy to update you in terms of the work that she's asked the teams to do around forward planning.
Yes, please, if you'd like to come in there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. Yes, Councillor Evans, we're very, very mindful of the impact of this. And, you know, I think you'll have seen from the Cabinet report on the budget monitors that the situation has improved significantly from where we were with the July monitor through to September. And as the Leader said, that's been due to the work that financial officers across Wales have been doing with local government officials, and then the nigh on 80 million that's been invested. Clearly, every year we are heading into the development of the medium-term financial plan. So the COVID impact on the budget is weighing very, very much on our minds as we start to set that programme. You know, it is fortunate we've had those those conversations and the successful outcomes. And and I'm pleased to say as well that I think all treasurers with Welsh Government have taken a very mature approach to try and target where the funds are needed most. So as the leader also alluded to, we've also have a close watch on council tax income. We're also considering what the sort of potential economic downturn could do to our council tax income as a council. So each of those, Myrion, as the head of finances, he's monitoring the position very closely, and each discussion that we have, so corporate management team meets, but we meet in at the moment again 3 times a week, because we've moved partially back into response phase. But as part of that, at least once a week, we talk about the council's finances and what the impact of COVID is doing on the budgets, both in terms of income and any additional challenges we have. So, for example, if and I'm not suggesting we would, but should the situation change from a position of local restriction into further lockdowns, and we had to provide additional support to vulnerable people, what would that mean for the bottom line for us financially? So we're keeping a very close watch on it, and that will feature as part of the monthly COVID report. There'll be a finance section within those. So, just to give some reassurance, I cannot say that, that it'll be a rosy picture by the time we get to the 31st of March, but as a senior team, we are keeping a very, very close watch on what the budgets are doing in relation to COVID, Councillor Evans.
Thank you for that. Councillor Al-Nuami.
Yes, good afternoon, Jane and Bev. It's really difficult, isn't it? It would be difficult for us not to give you credit really for what happened in the last 6 months. It's been a very, very difficult time. And I suppose to a certain extent, 6 months on, and at least we're holding a meeting and we are sort of trying to resume the sort of democratic process in the council. What I find it difficult with the annual report, and I found really your recovery plan is very important. So I think the two are together, aren't they? We can't sort of, because I'm sure Jane, you spoke about both at the same time in your presentation. What I found very interesting, this is part of, sorry, I've got another, because of the document, it's easier to have paper sometimes, isn't it? But on your annual report under well-being objective 4, build cohesive and sustainable communities, which is, a very laudable objective, obviously. And then I looked at your recovery plan there, and strategic aim 4, which really sounds very, very interesting. Provide people with the resources and support they need to move out of the crisis, considering in particular the impact that COVID has had on our minority and marginalized communities. And I think my first question would be to ask you both, yourself and the Chief Executive, as to what concrete steps have been either planned or done in order to achieve that one particular one, sort of look at the COVID-19 on the marginalized and sort of minority communities here.
Thank you, Leader, if you'd like to come in there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Al-Nuami. Yes, I think actually we've started to implement quite a lot of work on this. So if I could just start in considering some of our most marginalised group, particularly the homeless. We have supported rough sleepers and homeless people into accommodation. What I'm really pleased about that, and the way that that's worked during this period, particularly in terms of our aims, is that really reflects the strength of partnership working across the city. So as you'll be aware, we've actually got a rough sleepers group which works together on this, and that's made up of our council staff, housing association and charity partners, so Pobble and the Woolwich. and also health, public health and the police. And I'd really like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to Gwent Police for the contribution that they've made to this. They've played a really, really important role in this, and I'd like to highlight that. So when the COVID outbreak actually started, I'm sure colleagues, as you're aware, the Welsh Government were very clear that there was an expectation that we would, all local authorities would have a duty to provide some sort of temporary accommodation to all rough sleepers. And that was a real challenge for Newport, a challenge because there were a number of people who were rough sleeping, as you know, but also, and this is something that perhaps many people are not aware of, also during the lockdown, where people had perhaps been temporarily accommodated by family or friends in a way we might describe as sofa surfing. Obviously, during that period, some of those relationships broke down as well, and the number of people who were homeless actually increased significantly. So we were able to identify around about 140 people who were homeless in the sense that they were roofless. They didn't have a roof over their head. So during that period, we worked very closely in partnership, and we were able to provide that particular marginalised group with accommodation, and that's using a range of sources to do that, including the temporary accommodation that we've established down at Mission Court. And I'd like to stress why this is so important, because so some of the people within this community obviously are very vulnerable, have underlying health issues and other support needs. But critically, during this period, they needed self-contained accommodation in case they needed to self-isolate. And this was a real priority for Welsh Government, and we've worked closely with our partners to achieve that. I'm pleased to say that a number of households, individuals have actually moved on from that accommodation as well. And we have bid into Welsh Government for further capital funding and revenue funding to be able to continue to take forward this response. But I would stress in relation to delivering against the Gwent homeless strategy and our contribution to that, particularly in relation to this particularly marginalised group, there is a need for ongoing funding with that, and we've certainly shared that with Welsh Government. So we have started to work and increased the work that we do with those groups. We've worked closely with our registered social landlords during this period as well to try to hasten the availability of properties that have been void, to try and hasten those, bring them back into use so that people can move on into those. And of course, we've moved closely with the private rented sector on that as well. But as we've already said, and this is quite important, isn't it, that actually what COVID did reveal is really some of the poverty and disadvantage that we've experienced across Wales. And I'd really like to thank all of our officers who've worked from our community hubs. We've provided over 1,000 food parcels to vulnerable residents during this time. And again, this is something else where we've worked with vulnerable groups. We've worked with people who are financially marginalised in order to ensure that they are supported through this. I'd like to share with you as well some of the work that we've got ongoing, which really started during this period as a response to the Black Lives Matter movement. So we've had a series of roundtables with representatives from the Black and minority ethnic community across Newport, and we will continue to work together with them to deliver on some of the aspirations of the Black Lives Matter manifesto. And this is something that we're looking at not as just as an individual local authority where we are engaging with representatives, but we're also looking at this in terms of the work that we do as a public service board with our partners across Newport. And again, I'd like to really highlight the work that the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner is doing on this. They are doing an awful lot of work around this as well. So these are some examples of where we are working with some of our minority and marginalised communities to try and address some of these issues. But what I'd also like to highlight as well is that whilst this work is ongoing, we are also doing a lot of work to establish the evidence base. So colleagues may be aware that we've been undertaking community impact assessments across the city with a range of different groups and communities to understand the impact that COVID-19 and lockdown has had on them, and also to help to highlight for us issues that we may need to address going forward. So I'd just like to give you the assurance really that this work continues to be a priority and is ongoing. And I don't know if Chief Executive you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, please, if you would like to.
I don't think so, Leader and Chair. I think you've covered all the necessary and salient points. I think the community impact assessment is really, really important because that gives us an understanding of what issues clearly we need to address and how we need to influence the corporate plan going forward. So I think that the leaders covered all the key points, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. I think. Yeah, you sort of dwelled on the help that we given a very, very vulnerable and marginalised group, and that is obviously the homeless. I mean, you know, I've been in correspondence with you about that simply because it was a ward matter for me as well. Yeah, but I was sort of thinking about the aim and about the cohesion, and I think you alluded to it at the end of your presentation with the Black Lives Matter, because of course part of the problem there, you know, part of what sparked that protest during the summer, both in America and here, is really the conditions people find themselves and the way they get treated, and of course it's related to marginalization and deprivation. And I think this is what I am sort of looking forward to our council, you know, from that aim that you have in there, is to say, you know, we're planning further work to really, yes, you know, increase the cohesiveness. Yes, let's see why COVID has, for example, claimed more casualties in terms in sort of ethnic minority communities, and how we can actually help to increase the cohesiveness and the inclusion of people. So you alluded to it, but you know, I'm hoping that aim, you know, was going to be developed to hopefully next year when we hold in the annual report again, we can actually point out to some real progress in terms of what we said that aim is going to do. So yeah.
Leader, if you'd like to come back, if you wish.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you both. Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more strongly on that particular issue. So as I said, we have set up a series of meetings with representatives, but I need to be absolutely clear about this. From the outset, the intention was not to establish a talking shop, but actually to see real action. And the real actions will be based on our response to the manifesto, the Black Lives Matter manifesto, because it's important, I think, for everybody to understand that this is what people have brought forward to other groups in society, and to help to support them to have their rightful place in society. And there are actions, many actions contained in that manifesto that as a public body we can respond to, particularly around workforce equality. So I'd just like to share with colleagues that I think it was probably only just before we went into lockdown, maybe even just a week before, I was happy to attend the launch of our staff, Black and minority ethnic staff network here at the City Council. I'm really pleased, you know, to listen to some of our officers, listen to people who work across service areas and hear their aspirations and what they would like from the City Council as an employer. But it's also incumbent on us, as well as listening to our existing group, that we create opportunities for people from Black and minority ethnic communities, particularly young people, and help them to access good quality training, apprenticeships and career progression opportunities. So these opportunities shouldn't just be at entry level, they should be at graduate trainee level as well. And we really should seek to be representative of the communities that we serve. So for example, I think if you look at the population of Newport, we've got somewhere around 13.5% of our population are from Black and minority ethnic communities. And yet actually our staff, in terms of the City Council, only probably around 5%. And we need to set clear goals to work towards having a staff cohort that reflects the communities that we serve. But I would also add that, to that, political representation as well. Actually, it's really important that politicians across the city reflect the communities that they serve as well. And so I'm really quite pleased that this week I attended the launch of the East programme, which is established to support people from Black and minority ethnic communities to sign up with people who are engaged in public life, to be mentored and support them in terms of their career journey. So I'm proud to be acting as a mentor on that, and I've had an opportunity to work with them on that. And also, and I have to really emphasise this because this is important, and this is something for every single employee and every single elected member, is that we have to look to ourselves as well, and we have to look to perhaps our subconscious prejudice that we may have, and any subconscious bias that we may have. And we'll certainly be implementing training for all of our staff and all of our elected members as well, because one of the very clear requests in the Black Lives Matter manifesto is that everybody in public bodies has awareness training, and we will be taking that forward as well. So just to give you that assurance, Councillor Al-Nuaimi and all colleagues, that work is ongoing, and yes, we absolutely, this time next year when we come back to look at this again, we will see significant progress.
Thank you, Lida. I had a question next, but I think you've pretty much covered a lot in my question. It was just going from this the health emergency draft that's actually on the screen, but it was the line in there that says identify, develop and seek to sustain any positive developments emerging during the crisis. And I'm just wondering whether there was anything that you pointed out quite a few already, so sort of you've almost answered my question, but I was wondering what in there you would say that, you know, I said the positives that have come from the crisis and that we would be carrying forward, because I'd be interested to hear, because obviously, as I said, some things are that there have been some positives coming out of all this negative. So if you'd like to fill in any more on that one.
There are a couple of issues that I'd like to highlight, and I'm sure that the Chief Executive would welcome an opportunity to comment on this as well. So the first issue that I'd like to highlight in terms of a positive that we can take from this is the strength in our partnership working. And this is our partnership working at all levels. So if you look at the structures that are in place under civil contingencies legislation, how effectively they've worked through this. And I'm sure the Chief Executive would like to comment on that. How actually, I would say a positive in that is how we've worked in a cross-party way politically. So the engagement with the leaders of all the political groups in Newport and how we've worked as part of the emergency response. Again, there was a very mature and considered approach where we put to one side political differences and work together for the benefit of the people of Newport. On partnership working, I'd say the same about working through the Welsh Local Government Association. For the first 2 months, certainly for the first month, local authority, the 22 leaders, we were meeting on a daily basis. That then moved to 3 times a week, then to a weekly pattern, and now we're on to a fortnightly pattern. But that those relationships in terms of sharing experiences, but also mutual support, have been key to this, and certainly that is a strength that we can take from that too. And I would also say the relationship with Welsh Government, because I have to say, and I'd really like to emphasise this, that Welsh Government have been very supportive of us here in Newport. And I'd just like to give you an example of that in terms of the engagement that we've had with them over the past week. We've had engagement with Vaughan Gethin, the Minister for Health and Social Care, on almost a daily basis. And on Monday, we were in a meeting with the First Minister, the Minister for Health and Social Care, the Minister for Local Government, with the other South East Wales local authority leaders and chief executives and other public sector partners. And the First Minister was actually consulting with us on our views on some of the decisions that he needed to make before he spoke to the nation that evening. And so what I would like to say is certainly within this Welsh context, the strength of partnership working is really been very, very powerful, and is a great positive to take from this. And I'd like to pay tribute as the chair of the One Newport PSB to our PSB partners, because they've been great support to us as well. So that is one strength. And then another positive that I'd like to highlight is what we've done as a local authority around technology and agile working. Who would have thought, if we'd have come to a scrutiny committee in January and told you that in 2 months' time, almost the entire workforce of the City Council would be working remotely, we'd be engaging virtually through Teams and other packages. If we'd have come to you and said that, I'm sure we would have been met with great scepticism. It's actually been a tremendous feat and a great achievement that we've been able to do this so quickly, and in doing this, ensure that we maintain essential service provision for the people of Newport. It's been absolutely outstanding, and I can't claim any of the responsibility for that, because that has been down to the outstanding work that our officers have done. So from the SRS service, you know, Reece and his team, the way that they've supported us with this, getting the technology out there and supporting the workforce as well. And I think this is a really important aspect of that. And certainly, I think working in this way has actually enabled us to work more closely together and have some positive outcomes in what has been a really, really challenging and, well, unprecedented period. And so I think they're positives that we can take forward from this. And I suppose finally, I did mean only to talk about those, but something quite important does spring to mind. And that is the way that our social services colleagues have actually supported some of our service users. And we heard earlier how some of those service users who use building-based services have had alternatives put in place. Our social care staff have been absolutely outstanding during this period, and that in itself is a great positive as well. So I think I could go on for quite some time on the positives that we can take from this, but I'd like to move on now and ask the Chief Executive if she'd like to comment.
Thank you, Leader. Chief Executive, if you'd like to come in there.
Thank you, Chair. For me, there's probably 3 words that describe the last few months about the organisation, and they are positives: resilience, adaptability and agility, because I think that the way that the Council responded to the pandemic, are there lessons to be learned? Yes, there always are, but I think the way that the Council responded to this crisis, you know, there's lots of positives that we need to take away from it. I think the leaders already mentioned partnerships, so I won't go into that in any great detail, but just to say that, you know, I've been really pleased by the support that has been given to Newport City Council over the last 6 months by a range of partners, particularly through the Public Service Board. It's been phenomenal in the way that I think any senior officer could make a phone call any day of the week and receive support in addressing some of the issues that we were facing. So at a very real and practical level, that partnership support has been there. Team working. I would like to thank all members for the support their officers received during the last 6 months. It's been difficult. I think our schemes of delegation, our governance arrangements, have been exemplified really as being continuing to be able to work differently, with cabinet member reports, etc. still continuing. But I would like to thank members on behalf of all colleagues for the support that we've received. And also take this opportunity, Chair, to indulge me just to thank the staff team, the whole organisation. It's just been outstanding, and the support the senior team have given me personally, we would not have got to where we are today without that. But I think as far as team working concerns the organisation, it's probably instilled a new level of maturity across the organisation. We work differently, so there's certainly some new ways of working, which I think through the scrutiny process over the coming months, we want to explore and discuss with you at a cross-party level as to how the organisation matures in relation to the use of our assets and technology, as the leader's already said. The introduction of IT at pace back in March, was the platform from which we then evolved for 4 months of working. Our approach to communications is also changing. We're trying to get key messages out there in a slightly different way. And clearly, there's the environmental impacts and carbon reduction impacts, which national, the UK government and Welsh government have also acknowledged. So it's now how we harness that. And as I just mentioned, we want to do some work over the coming months. Once hopefully the response phase dies down a little again, to start discussing those issues with you as members. So I think that's all I want to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, both. At the moment, it doesn't look like we have any further questions for anybody. I'll just give it a little second to see if anybody quickly puts their hand up, but there aren't any further hands up in the raised hand section. Councillor Fawsey, there's a question from Councillor Fawsey. Come forward, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, whilst there's an opportunity, I just wanted to ask about new ways of working, particularly for social services. Actually, I don't know if that could be answered. There's two areas that I think would be good to consider. One is where we talk about support for adolescents on the edge of care. And I wonder how support for that group of people can be achieved in a new way of working. And another area is people with Alzheimer's, and are there new ways of working online for people with Alzheimer's? I think this perhaps is a question for Chris Humphreys, but I didn't want to lose the opportunity, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair. Shall I respond? Thank you, Councillor Fawsey. I think some of the things that, as an examples, and I think you are right in that we have to take the positives from this situation we've been in. A good example is that some of the engagement we've been doing with younger people, interestingly, they've been more comfortable with doing it virtually, using kind of Teams and Zoom and different mechanisms such as that, rather than the face-to-face contact. So I think that's something, and we've actually found their willingness to engage and have those conversations that they need to have, it's less confrontational doing it, because as we know, younger people, they're used to using their screens, and so that's something that we will continue with. As an example, in terms of older people, but not necessarily all older people, with people with Alzheimer's, we've again, with using kind of some of the funding we've had from Welsh Government, we've bought some sort of interactive tools and screens. which have been very helpful in using to keep people in our care homes in contact with their families, and also that's been really positive, and that's had a really good results as well. So there are definitely things that we can build on, and we'll continue to develop and use over time. I've got some meetings coming up. We've done a lot of work around what is broadly called telecare in the last 12 months, and that service now sits with our occupational therapy team, and we've also got a collaborative relationship going with Monmouthshire and Caerphilly around telecare. So we've got lots of development work happening to support people with technology. Obviously, as people know, sometimes that isn't, I think of it as it's not replacing personal one-to-one care, it's about supplementing it. It's about actually using it to in different ways to support people. For a good example would be as a prompting mechanism to remind people to take their medication, things like that. So yeah, there's lots of work happening in those areas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Matthew Evans, if you've got another question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, it's just a general question about what effect you think the local lockdown will have on our strategic recovery aims, how much impact that will have, and what do you think would be the biggest concerns about it?
Lydia, if you'd like to come in.
I think at this point it's too soon to say. I mean, we've just moved into this current period of enhanced restrictions, and what I would say is if people continue to follow the rules, then I'd be very hopeful that we'd move out of it pretty quickly as well. But I think it is very much a fluid situation at the moment, and we need to be mindful of that. I'm pleased to see that the Chancellor has made an announcement on support today, and whilst I haven't had an opportunity to look at the detail of that yet, I'm really keen to look at that and see what additional support that will provide for people. But it is something that we need to keep under constant review. I don't know if the Chief Exec would like to.
Please come in if you do.
Just to add, clearly what we're watching is the economy. Councillor Evans, that's where we've got our closest eye at the moment, as the leader said. It's very early days, but we are engaged with some of our key partners very quickly to keep an eye on what's going on.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris.
Hello. Hello, I'm curious, in the present dire straits that we're in with the economy being in a terrible situation and people not likely to come in and support local businesses, what effect has the gating of the High Street and Cambrian Road and Griffin Street had? Have we had any feedback on that, for better or for worse, please?
Lydia, if you'd like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Ferris. I'm sure that you'll be aware that one of the reasons for doing this was to enable many of the businesses to open back up safely at a point where people were unable to go into the establishments, but were able to meet outside. So it was really key to provide a safe environment for those businesses to operate and to open that back up, but also to provide a safe environment for people to move around the city centre in a way that they could be confident about social distancing. And in fact, we've had some positive feedback from businesses on the engagement that our public protection officers have actually had with them. So again, this is something that we continue to monitor. I think by and large, the feedback that we've had is that it's actually given people more confidence to use the city centre. Chief Exec, I don't know if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, come in, please.
Nothing to add. The feedback we've had through the bid and from some individual discussions that the teams have had, it's positive.
Councillor Ferris, I believe you've got your hand up to come back.
Yes, so this really is a COVID thing. If, and heaven hope that we get there, that this no longer poses a threat, will we go back to allowing a sort of a moderate amount of traffic to have some access along the old high street and Cambrian Road, like the taxis, for example?
Is that for the leader or the chief executive?
Well, either or, really. I'm proud.
Who would like to answer?
Who wants to answer me? I'm quite happy.
Oh, sorry, Bev. It looked like you were going to come in. I was
just going to say, did you want to answer, leader, or me? Sorry.
Go ahead, leader.
At this stage, Councillor Ferris, it really is too soon to comment, isn't it? Because we did everything that we could to support businesses to reopen, and we find ourselves again in a position where cases have spiked in Newport, and we've had the government has had to impose localised restrictions upon us. So I really wouldn't like to answer either way at this stage, because quite frankly, we have no idea how long we'll be in this position in terms of the virus and recurrent outbreaks of the virus. I don't know whether you'd like to add to that, Chief Executive.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Chair, sorry, I can't raise my hand. I lost the ability to look. Can I come in if no one else is ahead of me?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Go ahead, McDad. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Mommy.
Yeah, I really just like to comment to Councillor Ferris. I have to say, as ward councillor, I'm pleased to see that the city's pedestrianisation is being respected. And I think it's really nice, you know, even after the COVID, that actually that space is used for businesses to entertain people and for people to have a drink there, whether it's coffee or a glass of wine or whatever they have in there, in peace. You know, I agree with the leader really about obviously not being able to comment on that, because that is a temporary traffic management order. But I do really think it's far nicer for the city space to be used for people to enjoy rather than have taxis breathing down their necks all the time. You know, I just felt I really had to say that, Councillor Ferris. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Al-Mamami. So there are no more further hands up. So I'd just like to thank the leader and the chief exec and all the other officers that have come along to the meeting for your time and your information. We're more than happy if you need to leave, that you can do so, and we'll continue with the forward work programme. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, colleagues. Good evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item, so obviously the final item on the agenda, unless there are any further comments on what we've heard from the annual report, is the forward work plan. And I believe there's an item that we were due to review obviously before lockdown, and that was the strategic equalities plan. If I'm not right there, if people can let me know otherwise, but I believe it's the equalities plan, and that's going to be on the 30th of October, 10 AM.
Yes, Chair, we've got the strategic equalities plan coming up next time. I think the annual safeguarding report will come as well. The rest of the forward work programme we're still working on at the moment in terms of other things that are coming out of the COVID recovery plans. There are a number of things I think in the pipeline for your committee, one of which I think was alluded to in the presentation, which was the new ways of working report that is coming forward in terms of council working in the light of COVID recovery. So that will come on the work programme sometime in the next couple of months. But yeah, next committee, you're looking at the annual safeguarding report and strategic equalities. Now, the strategic equalities plan will be on council at the end of September. So unfortunately, that's slightly out of sync with the scrutiny meetings. But as this always comes to scrutiny, then it will come to your next meeting just for comment anyway.
Thank you. I don't see any hands up regarding the forward work plan. So if there are no comments, then I can.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Councillor Evans. Yeah.
I did try and put my hand up. Just going back to one of the concerns I raised about having explanations to the red performance indicators. Can we sort of minute that to ensure that we get an explanation for the red and amber